You are listening to Talking Star Wars. Good day, I'm Connor.
And I'm Alex.
We're going to talk about Star Wars today,
I know this is shocking to many of you.
but it's what we tend to do. And we have another installment of our missed opportunities category of episodes.
So I've managed to talk Connor around to being a little less negative now, but we do want to do a talk about an area of the story from the sequel trilogy where there's sort of a lack of clarity and never really explored in the depth that we would like.
And there's this key moment where Rey, our protagonist,
This is in The Force Awakens.
yes, is about to receive Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. And this alien creature, this ancient alien creature, older than Yoda,
Maz Kanata
uh, owns a pub, a cantina-like space.
on the planet of Takodana.
That I wouldn't have been able to remember that. She has some force sensitivity, and she also possesses Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. And how did she get that lightsaber?
Well, your guess, everyone, is as good as ours because Disney and Star Wars have not said.
It's a tale for another day. It's a story for another day.
Which is the worst type of world building. Because, well, let's compare and contrast some scenes here, if we will, Connor. So, picture the scene in The Force Awakens where, Rey has had this, one of the better scenes in that movie, where Rey has this vision, this forced vision, sees Luke with his hand on R2D2, hears these prophetic words, picks up the lightsaber, her nascent force sensitivity is freaking out. And yet, then Maz comes up, gives her a generic inspirational speech, which is a disservice to the character of Maz.
Yes, we get this idea that this lightsaber is calling out to Rey. We never find out why.
Yeah, because Rey even asks, "How did you get this?" And she says,
I don't know exactly, but it's a story for another day. That's
"Yes,
what it comes down to. And this is a part of the director, J.J. Abrams. It's a part of uh, his cliche of creating mystery boxes, where he thinks that the greatest part of a story is the mystery, but not the revelation, which is, I would say, wrong, because a mystery is nothing without its truth.
yeah." And so, as I say, let's compare that scene to Obi-Wan giving the same lightsaber to Luke Skywalker in A New Hope, where we get casual references to him being on a spice freighter, or the Clone Wars with no other context, where
Mm-hmm.
obviously at least some of this world building has happened already,
Mm-hmm.
and there's references made, and it makes the world feel lived in. It makes the characters feel real.
And
Whereas,
we get a description of what this is. This is an elegant weapon from a more civilized age. We get context as to what this is.
yeah, whereas for when Maz hands the lightsaber to Rey, and it becomes a focal point for the next several episodes, or the next 3 episodes of Star Wars, episodes 7, 8, and 9,
Mhm.
we never return to the story of how it got into her hands.
Which is confusing because, kind of to give a brief walkthrough of the history of this blade, Anakin Skywalker must have built it after his original lightsaber, which might not even be his original. I have a feeling he went through a couple in his Padawan ship, but it gets destroyed in Attack of the Clones in a droid assembling factory, and he has the same lightsaber from the Clone Wars onward.
Yes, so he makes the lightsaber after the Geonosis battle, carries it through the Clone Wars, up until his final duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi on Mustafar, where he then loses the arm and hand that was holding it, and Obi-Wan takes it into his custody.
And then gifts it to Luke. We see this continuum of ownership, and there's this great reverence of this is your father's weapon. This is the Excalibur. This is the. We'll get into an entire focus episode where we just gush on lightsabers and their significance. But in the purpose of today's conversation, we get this clear idea of uh, what the value is and how it's personally valuable to Luke. We don't have any idea why this lightsaber is calling out to Rey in A Force Awakens, though.
Well, part of it is that we now have some expanded lore about kyber crystals to apply here.
Certainly, this is, it is not an entirely inert physical object. It does have presence in the Force and a Force connection to those who wield it.
But is usually connected to the owner, and it makes sense why Luke would have some connection because it's his father's lightsaber. But Rey, as we know, is not a Skywalker. She is a Palpatine. And there was no interaction between Palpatine and this lightsaber, really. So it's nebulous as to why this is hers when really it should be Kylo's. It should be calling to Ben Solo and trying to redeem him.
So I think there's interesting use of this lightsaber that they could have talked about more was that so Luke loses the lightsaber, so to continue on the story of its ownership.
Mhm.
So Luke possesses the lightsaber through episodes 4 and up to 5,
Mhm.
when he then loses it when his hand is sliced off by Darth Vader.
It's
One
like
of the more shocking moments in the original Star Wars trilogy.
it's like poetry. It rhymes. This lightsaber is not freely given; it is taken along with the hand that holds it.
Yeah, but then it vanishes until Maz Kanata has it, 20 years later. Uh,
And why not just have a fill-in line to say how she found it, why she found it? Because to say, "Oh, it's a story for another day," builds it up as something significant, something important. But we never get an answer. And there might be a comic out there somewhere that says,
not as far as I'm
yeah.
aware. Is there an explanation of how that lightsaber came into Maz's possession?
Mhm.
When there's stories explaining how much less significant things have gotten
Mhm.
to other places. And honestly, it's not even that important. It is an
Mhm.
object. I mean, we didn't need to have a whole story about the lightsaber sitting in Obi-Wan's trunk for 20 years,
Mhm.
but it did. One of the true, I think, missed opportunities there is is actually a sign of Luke growing as a Jedi when he makes his own lightsaber then.
Mhm.
He loses his father's lightsaber. It is taken from him by his father,
Mhm.
along with his hand. But then when Return of the Jedi comes around, he has made his own with a green blade, and that is the lightsaber he uses himself for the rest of his life.
So it's this demonstration of personal growth, dipping in a little bit in the future when he projects himself in The Last Jedi. He's not wielding his green lightsaber, he's wielding his father's lightsaber, which in that case I find it somewhat interesting because between, uh, we don't see this blue lightsaber again until A Force Awakens. Once Rey and Finn both wield it, Kylo Ren is very angry and would like possession of that lightsaber. It belongs to him through lineage, through blood. From Anakin through Leia to him, it's something that he should possess. And so he does not end up possessing it. We go through Rey training with the lightsaber with Luke. Uh, he asks, where'd you get that lightsaber? And he tosses it over his shoulder. And all of the weight and all of the significance in where this lightsaber came from, why it's important, is thrown away. And I'm a Last Jedi apologist, but having all of this significance built up only for it to be tossed away leads us, I don't know, to question why there's such a mystery built up in the first place.
Because if we look at the exact story beats that happen with the lightsaber, it could have been an interesting way to use the lightsaber as an example of lineage and of responsibility and of accepting identity. So, I mean, Kylo and Rey fight for the lightsaber at the end of The Last Jedi and
Mhm.
split in twain. But then by the time the Rise of Skywalker comes around, Rey has simply repaired it,
Mhm.
and it is the same as it was before.
And before we dip into that, it's after the lightsaber is destroyed that we see Luke wielding the blue lightsaber, which could be a way of, one, previewing that he is not physically there, but he is a projection. Two, it could be this, again, this symbol, this sense of ownership. Ben Solo wants this lightsaber, it belongs to him, and Luke is kind of shoving it in his face like, no, you are not deserving of this weapon. You are not this torchbearer of the light side. Luke is standing as that symbol. So he is wielding that lightsaber of mythology. Uh, but when it comes to Rey just taking the physical lightsaber and then welding it back together, it doesn't show that same growth that it did with Luke, where Luke lost this lightsaber, built a new one. Rey ostensibly lost the lightsaber, rebuilt it. It could be a commentary on trying to, rebuild and reacclaim some of that lost legacy. But it also kind of feels a little bit lazy because there's no
Yeah, so
progression.
I mean, if you're even trying to view them as direct parallels, that was the perfect opportunity for Rey to have them made her own double-bladed lightsaber of some
Mhm.
kind to match her staff fighting.
With
And
a lightsaber that's cut in two, with a crystal that's cut in two.
yeah, as seen with Ahsoka Tano doing the same thing with an Inquisitor's lightsaber. You
Mhm.
could do the same thing, but no, they just made it exactly as it was before.
Mhm.
We don't even get a scene of Rey having repaired it. It just is then intact in the next movie.
Mhm. I mean, she claims Leia's lightsaber because we learned that Leia was training to be a Jedi. She had her own lightsaber and was training with Luke, and Luke, you know, gifts her this lightsaber. And when Rey faces Palpatine and Ben Solo, redeemed, arrives to battle the Knights of Ren, it's through their connection through a Force dyad that Rey is able to give uh, Ben Anakin's lightsaber. So we have some that heritage, that legacy being passed along. So that's where I see the idea of keeping the lightsaber intact is fruitful. But I could also easily see, say, if we gave Rey this double-bladed lightsaber, have it be cut in half, she's wielding half, uh, Ben's wielding half, and then we don't have to have this contrived CGI mess of a scene where Luke and Leia are training with lightsabers, and then we learned that Leia never took up the Jedi Code and disappointed me as a fan personally. Um, that was a small ramble, but it's sloppy. It's not as well
Yeah, because it could have
thought
been
out.
this great emotional moment where Ben, who has been pursuing the lightsaber for 3 movies now as a symbol of being closer to his idol, Darth Vader,
Mm-hmm.
Anakin Skywalker, desperately wants his lightsaber. He even, as he says in The Force Awakens, that's mine.
Belongs to me. Yeah.
But Rey instead retains possession of it. But yeah, but then they have this forced diet. But there was a great opportunity for driving home that duality with the split in twain lightsaber at the
Mm-hmm.
end of The Last Jedi. And so it felt like J.J. Abrams wanted to include the moment where she passes him the lightsaber
Mm-hmm.
directly to him, but to do that he had to undercut the emotional moment from the previous movie,
Mm-hmm.
which is a problem in the sequel trilogy in general. Is these moments not quite all gelling together across all 3 movies?
Because say what you will, I would say the prequel trilogy was planned within an inch of its life, with some adjustment here and there, but it was pretty like lockstep with George Lucas's concept. The original trilogy kind of gloriously made up as it went along
But
because
it didn't have a whole lot to. All it had to do was build upon itself.
yeah, whereas the sequel trilogy is actively contradicting itself, movie after movie after movie.
Yeah. Is this the lost Excalibur from Anakin Skywalker and Luke Skywalker that is then taken up by their metaphorical heir that she then must learn to outgrow? Or is the lightsaber the symbol of the dual motivations and bond between Kylo Ren and Rey, and then
Mm-hmm.
becomes a physical symbol of their rivalry and eventual friendship and
Mm-hmm.
allyship? Or is it a symbol of Ben Solo's redemption, where he is able to finally wield his grandfather and uncle's
Yeah.
lightsaber to fight off the literal ghosts of his past?
Mm-hmm.
It's all of those things, but it's trying to do all of them at once.
And so it's none of those things. It's too scattered. It's not focused enough.
And then, yeah, there's just, and the introduction of Leia's lightsaber is just further complicating and making this messy. And then
Mm-hmm.
both lightsabers end up buried at the end, which, had they been used thematically and appropriately throughout all 3 movies, might have felt interesting. But instead, feels like now Rey has made her own lightsaber. But unlike the Return of the Jedi, where he uses it to save Han Solo and Chewbacca and himself, instead she's just carrying it around.
Yeah, we don't get to see it actively utilized. There's a pretty decent fan edit out there, which
Connor does love his fan edits.
I do. I've watched so many of them, even like back to back. Like, let's compare this one of New Hope to this and A New Hope fan edit. But there's a Rise of Skywalker fan edit by Hell 9000, where he at least visually does something with the lightsabers. He makes Leia's purple, and he makes the repaired Anakin lightsaber have the same wavery effect as Kylo Ren's. So it's that sort of cracked, active
Yeah,
crystal.
it would be that commitment to visual storytelling
Mhm.
in a subtle way
Yeah.
that was really not entirely present in the sequel trilogy.
Mhm.
And coming back to the crux of our misconnection, we still never figure out how it got to Maz. And we don't necessarily even need to know, but it's the very dialogue of a good question and a good story for another time.
Mhm. So let's say um, they could have just said, "Oh, I found it." Maz found it. It was in the junk, etc.
I rescued it from the First Order.
But in our way, if we can at least correct Captain Phasma and how she could have had a complete three-part arc in the sequel trilogy, if there needed to be some mystery, could we have tied the discovery of this lightsaber to Rey and her parents at all? If they were scavengers as well, just galactic scavengers, uh, they came across Bespin and found it. Or um, I thought, what if we have this moment where Vader finds his lightsaber? He's going to search for Luke, or the troopers are going to search for Luke in uh, Bespin, and all they can find is the lightsaber. And we have this moment with Vader and his original lightsaber. How would he treat that? Would he toss it behind his shoulder? Would he throw it in the trash, or would he treat it with reverence?
So, if I were to choose what to do with the blue lightsaber made by Anakin Skywalker, wielded by Luke Skywalker through Empire Strikes Back, I would have tied it more tightly to Ben Solo and Kylo Ren's story
Mm-hmm.
subsequent to The Force Awakens,
Sure.
where it's his fixation, where it's something that Rey grows beyond and makes her own lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the arc that I would have used: is I believe that Luke and Ben together, when they were master, apprentice, uncle, and nephew, would have retrieved it.
Mm-hmm.
We know that Luke continued to use his um, green lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one he almost used to kill his nephew. And then Kylo did have a blue lightsaber
Mm-hmm.
to protect himself from Luke during the Rashomon style confrontation.
And during a time in canon where there might not be a planet where they can retrieve new kyber crystals, so they need to use as many older relics as they can for the new Jedi Order.
Yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily even have him using the lightsaber at that point. But I would have
Mm-hmm.
had it, maybe be in the new Jedi Temple,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would have had be lost during the attack of the Knights of Ren,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe Luke gives it to Maz before he goes into exile,
Sure.
or someone else takes it and is hunted by the Knights of Ren,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe Maz retrieved it from a First Order agent who was trying to retrieve it. As we can see from the Resistance television show, there were First Order agents everywhere as they were throwing their monetary and military power around. So there's lots of interesting ways that it could have come into Maz's possession. But you don't even need to necessarily address it other than Maz has it, or she could even just say it was entrusted to me by an old friend.
Sure.
Did Han Solo leave it with her?
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe he even had it, and then when his son went rogue, he no longer wanted it around,
Sure.
and so he gave it to Maz for safekeeping.
Or Leia, even in that case. This I'm going to hold on to my father's lightsaber as this symbol of redemption. Oh, my son just turned and repeated history. I want nothing to do with this relic.
Yeah, and Maz could have built her up more as also a collector of ancient artifacts as well.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly have enough of those that it would not have been. She could have used a little more personality anyway. She
Mm-hmm.
collects people and objects important to people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So to continue from that, I would have kept pretty much everything in The Force Awakens the same,
Mm-hmm.
because Kylo tries to grab it, Rey grabs
Mm-hmm.
it instead. It's chosen her. He's unworthy of his family's legacy. Great moment.
Mm-hmm. One thing I might have included was there's the map to Luke Skywalker, uh, and it turns out to be partly in BB-8, partly in R2-D2,
Well,
which
the R2D2
is
part makes no sense
right.
unless it was something triggered where Luke wanted to be found, but he very obviously didn't want to be found.
Mm-hmm. What if he, as a last-minute failsafe, uh, programmed that information, the missing piece of the map, into his lightsaber?
Or had the code cylinder inside the lightsaber somewhere,
Yeah.
which only someone powerful in the Force could have disassembled it to find it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's fairly well established in the new canon that you use the Force to assemble your lightsaber.
Right. You need that sensitivity. I love in the Clone Wars when the one lightsaber, the brash Padawan, just explodes in his face because he has no wherewithal
Yeah.
or the patience.
Yeah, in the
build one.
depiction in the Fallen Order game where you see Cal Kestis disassembling his lightsaber and all the pieces hovering around him.
Mhm.
Very visually interesting and
Mhm.
visually dynamic.
Hell, we could have even gotten a moment where Leia disassembled the lightsaber with the Force just to not bury the lead that she's Force sensitive.
Well, yeah, otherwise just have her fly through space. Needed a little bit
Mhm.
more of her force sensitivity coming into play.
Yeah.
Her using a Jedi mind trick, something
Mhm.
to establish that she has the power, even if she doesn't use it.
So that's just one piece of color. Could have been the lightsaber is the missing piece of the puzzle because whether Luke programmed the rest of the map in the lightsaber or Maz did, whomever. But so keeping the lightsaber the same throughout the Force Awakens.
Yeah, and so then when we get to the Last Jedi, you could even keep it same for most of that movie too,
Mhm.
where Rey is wielding it. Well, there's lots you need to reconcile between the three movies, but
Mhm.
Rey's wielding it. Kylo is still jealous about it.
Luke wants nothing to do with it at first until he uses it as a symbol of his.
Yeah,
You know,
but instead of having Luke be indifferent, give him a different emotion. Give him
Mhm.
an emotion. Give him
Disgust.
disgust.
Mhm.
Give him inadequacy. Give him shame,
Mhm.
which he's feeling, but he's hiding it beneath indifference,
Yeah.
which sort of makes sense for his character, I suppose. But have him like drop it, where it's like he gets the same Force vision that Rey did, and it's
Mhm.
obviously um,
Could be troubling to him.
troubling. Yes, in some way troubling rather than being dismissive.
Mhm.
I think, and then just changing that one moment. Then Rey keeps it. She
Mhm.
trains with it. We maybe a couple more conversations. Maybe even Luke can disassemble the lightsaber at one
Mhm.
point when he is trying to train her about the Force to show that he can still use the Force, or he instructs her how to do it at least.
Yeah.
Because if we limit his Force usage till the very end of the movie,
That'll make it more significant at the end then.
yeah, where
Mhm.
she's like, "Why can't you do it?" And he's like, "I can't. You have to do it. But
Yeah.
here's how you do it."
Mhm.
So it even gives her a concrete technique and then makes the object the center of a lesson and tying it more closely into the story. And then I would have the same confrontation happen. It is still the same lightsaber used to kill Snoke
Mhm.
by Kylo Ren. And then
Cool. Yeah.
Rey, then remember in that throne room fight, Kylo is still wielding his red lightsaber and Rey does grab the blue lightsaber.
Mhm.
So keep that the same. At some point, maybe they toss their lightsabers back and forth. I don't
Which
know.
I think they do. I think they Kylo holds the lightsaber up to one of the Praetorian guards, ignites the blade, and then de-ignites it without slashing or cutting at all. It's just a puncture wound. And then I believe I remember Rey using the cross-bladed red lightsaber.
Yeah. So I would have found
Mhm.
the throne scene more compelling. I overuse the word compelling in these, by the way, as if you listen. So,
Hmm.
kick me every time I say the word compelling more than once an episode.
Enthralling, engaging,
Yeah.
enraptured. I don't know.
So, I would find it more engaging if in that scene to drive home more the duality, because they've both been maybe disarmed at that point.
Mhm.
Maybe by Snoke, he's grabbed both of their lightsabers, where they both call out with the Force, and Rey ends up with the red lightsaber, the
Mhm.
crossguard of Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren ends up with the blue lightsaber of his father.
Mhm.
And then they fight through most of that scene with that, and maybe exchange halfway through when they have a spare
Mhm.
moment. But it would be visually interesting. And then maybe Kylo's red lightsaber is destroyed during the fight, and they share the one lightsaber in a series
Mhm.
of interesting choreographed combat.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they fight over the one remaining lightsaber. It breaks in half. He gets half of the kyber crystal. She gets half of the other half of the kyber crystal. And then at the end of the next movie, they both end up with a new lightsaber crafted from half of the broken kyber crystal. His having been bled by the dark side and being red. And then if by the end he purifies it, it would turn white like Ahsoka Tano's.
Sure.
Or it's unified into a single lightsaber at the end. But that's how I would do it in The Last Jedi.
I have seen Force Awakens concept art where I think the Jedi killer at that time had a double bladed lightsaber that was blue on one side, red on the other side, which could show his ever shifting duality and the inner struggle to remain fully dark.
Yeah, I would more call upon the same visual aesthetic from the
Mhm.
Ninth Jedi in Visions, where the color of the lightsaber itself changes as the
Sure.
kyber crystal changes, rather than doing a two-tone solution. So I would have it start as a new crackling red lightsaber,
Mhm.
or he repairs his old one but wears that half of the kyber crystal. Whatever you want to do. So
Yeah.
by the end of in the Rise of Skywalker, she's made her own lightsaber using half of that kyber crystal. He has the other half.
Could be a lightsaber pike. It would be a shorter blade on her staff.
Or double bladed light. I don't care.
However it works.
However it works. And then maybe either gets unified or she then makes her newest lightsaber with the unified halves of the kyber crystal.
Or her own.
Yeah, these are all options, but I mean, or just have it break and they each have to make a new lightsaber. Destroy the object and don't even have it in the next movie. And then
it shows they've broken the legacy of the Skywalkers.
Yeah, and then have Rey pass Kylo his mother's lightsaber in that pivotal scene. Still has a similar impact. Though if you still want to visually draw back the moment from The Force Awakens where he can't have the lightsaber and then she gives it to him, then you don't have the lightsaber break at the end of The Last Jedi. If you want to have that moment, don't have it breaks in half. Instead, have them clash their lightsabers and then maybe destroy his and he has to make a new one. I don't know. But don't break it in half and then just have it come back in the next movie.
Fully intact, yeah. That's where that fan edit at least gives it the crackle, so it shows that she's kind of towing the dark side line because she has an unfocused lightsaber blade like Kylo does. Yeah, these are all decisions. These are all choices that could have been made when in reality none were made. Or I should say the decision to undo previous decisions was made.
Yeah, because J.J. Abrams obviously wanted to pay off from his decision in Episode 7 to have the lightsaber fly to Rey instead of Kylo. And then at the end of Episode 9, Rey willingly hands it to Ben Solo. But that ignores and undercuts the broken in half moment from Episode 8. So J.J. Abrams, in order to get his payoff from his moment, ignored Rian Johnson's moment from Episode 8.
So this is, again, there are many pieces to the sequel trilogy. I would put the onus of the blame on Rise of Skywalker, but there are pieces in Last Jedi which are culpable as well in this back and forth undermining relationship that the directors had in the sequel trilogy. But just the option to give more weight when that is prompted by these creatives. Otherwise, just don't have it be as big of a significance. Give us a... got it from an old friend, got it from an old smuggler, got the lightsaber from Greedo. Just give us something. Give us, don't give us, oh, it doesn't matter, because then it disengages us from the story. And it forces us to accept something that really doesn't make sense, like why this lost lightsaber would be reclaimed. So, some polish.
Yeah, and I think we at least need to briefly discuss that Finn did wield the lightsaber briefly, and he did kill some stormtroopers using that same lightsaber.
Oh, yeah.
But ended up being sort of a fake out for his non-existent Jedi plot. So,
Which, listen to our previous episode on Finn, where we try to offer up some ideas as to completing his story arc rather than leave it stagnant in The Rise of Skywalker.
Well, this has been our Missed Opportunities episode on the blue lightsaber created by Anakin Skywalker and wielded by Luke Skywalker as it was depicted in the sequel trilogy.
And I assure you it will not be the last installment of Missed Opportunities. And we'll get to some areas that aren't just sequel trilogy. Even the original trilogy has some missed opportunities. I'm struggling to think of what they are right now, but I'm sure we'll find some.
Well, even the prequel trilogy has the truncated political storyline with Bail Organa that could have been expanded on. So we'll talk about some other missed opportunities in other media and other movies. But this has been our installment now, and we hope you found it interesting.
Thank you so much for listening. We've been talking Star Wars. We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.